When Emma and I first got married, I thought we were the picture of happiness. We had been together for 4 years, and everything seemed perfect. We were partners in every sense of the word, or so I thought. But as the years passed, small cracks began to form in our marriage, cracks that would eventually shatter everything we had built together. Emma began changing about 3 years into our marriage. At first, it was subtle. More nights out with her friends, staying later at work, or needing space. I gave her the benefit of the doubt because I trusted her. That trust was my downfall. One night, Emma came home from a weekend trip with her friends. As we were unpacking her things, she sat me down on the couch. "We need to talk," she said, her tone both serious and distant. She told me she didn't believe in traditional marriage anymore. "I love you," she said, "but I don't think one person should have the right to claim ownership over another. I've been doing a lot of soul searching, and I think I want to explore the idea of an open marriage." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. "Open marriage?" I repeated, stunned. "Yes," she said. "I think it'll help us grow as individuals. This isn't about me not loving you. It's about both of us being free to experience life without restrictions." I was furious and heartbroken. "So, this is your way of telling me you've been seeing someone else?" She hesitated, and that hesitation said more than any words could. "It's not like that. I've just been talking to someone, and it made me realize there's more out there. But I'm not leaving you. I want us to do this together." Together? The idea was laughable. The woman I thought I'd spend my life with was casually proposing that we dismantle the very foundation of our marriage. I told her I wasn't interested. I didn't sign up for this. "If you want an open marriage, you're free to have one. But it won't be with me." Emma was taken aback, almost offended. "You're so close-minded. This is why relationships fail. People are too possessive. You don't own me." The argument spiraled from there. Her words cut deep, and my responses weren't kind either. By the end of the night, I knew our marriage was over. I filed for divorce a week later. The process was messy. Emma tried to paint me as controlling and jealous to her friends and family, but the truth eventually came out when she introduced her new partner, less than a month after we separated. I spent the next year rebuilding my life. Therapy, focusing on my career, and surrounding myself with people who truly cared about me helped me heal. I thought I'd put Emma behind me for good, but a year after our divorce, she reached out. I ignored her first few messages, but eventually, curiosity got the better of me. She wanted to meet and talk. Against my better judgment, I agreed. When I saw her, she looked different. Tired, worn down, and not at all like the confident woman who had declared her independence from our marriage. She apologized, tears streaming down her face. "I made a mistake," she said. "The open marriage. It wasn't what I thought it would be. I lost myself, and I lost you. I miss what we had." I listened, but my heart remained guarded. She told me her new relationship had ended in disaster, that she'd realized too late what she'd thrown away. "I was wrong," she admitted. "I thought freedom meant being with anyone I wanted, but I didn't realize I already had the love and partnership I needed. Can we start over?" I shook my head. "Emma, I'm glad you've come to terms with your choices, but I've moved on. I've built a life without you, and I'm not going back." She looked crushed, but I didn't feel guilty. I had spent too long picking up the pieces of my shattered heart to let her break it again. Walking away from that meeting, I felt an overwhelming sense of closure. Emma's choices had cost her everything, and I was finally free from the weight of her betrayal. For the first time in years, I felt at peace as I walked away from that coffee shop where Emma and I had met. The weight of our past seemed to lift off my shoulders. There was no anger left in me, just clarity. She was no longer my burden to carry. For too long, I had questioned myself, whether I hadn't been enough, whether I could have done more. But in that moment, I realized something profound. Her choices weren't about me. They were about her. The next few weeks passed uneventfully, But Emma's reappearance in my life stirred some curiosity among mutual friends and family. A few of them asked if we were reconciling. I gave them the same answer every time. No, that chapter is closed, and it truly was. By then, I had started dating someone new. Her name was Laura, and she was everything Emma wasn't: kind, thoughtful, grounded, and most importantly, honest. Laura had come into my life unexpectedly, but she had been patient as I navigated the emotional aftermath of my divorce. One evening, as we were sitting together on the couch, I shared the details of Emma's recent apology. Laura listened without judgment, her hand resting gently on mine. "Do you regret anything?" she asked after I finished. "Maybe that I let her take so much of me for so long," I admitted. "But regret? No. If anything, it taught me what I truly deserve in a partner. It taught me how to value myself." Laura smiled, her eyes warm and reassuring. "I think that's what makes you so strong," she said. "You didn't let it break you." Months turned into a year, and my relationship with Laura grew stronger. She became my safe space, my partner in every sense of the word. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I could see a future worth fighting for. Meanwhile, I occasionally heard about Emma through mutual friends. She had been trying to rebuild her life too, but things hadn't been easy for her. The open marriage idea had alienated some of her friends, and her failed relationship had left her more isolated than ever. Part of me felt sorry for her. She wasn't a bad person, just someone who had made a series of selfish and short-sighted decisions. But I knew her journey wasn't mine to worry about anymore. One day, Emma sent me a final message. It was brief and simple. Asterisk, I just wanted to say I'm truly sorry for everything. I hope you're happy. You deserve to be. Asterisk, I didn't respond, not out of spite, but because there was nothing more to say. I hoped she found peace, but I was done looking back. As the second anniversary of my divorce approached, I found myself standing at a new crossroads. Laura and I were at the same coffee shop where I had met Emma for that awkward conversation a year earlier. This time, the atmosphere was light, the energy warm. Laura reached across the table and took my hand. "There's something I've been meaning to ask you," she said, her eyes sparkling with mischief. I raised an eyebrow. "Oh, what's that?" "How would you feel about us moving in together?" she asked, her smile tentative but hopeful. For the first time in years, the idea of sharing my life with someone didn't terrify me. It felt right. "I'd love that," I said, meaning every word. As we walked out of the coffee shop, hand in hand, I realized something important. Life doesn't always go the way we plan, but sometimes the detours lead us exactly where we're meant to be. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't just surviving. I was truly living. Moving in with Laura was one of the best decisions I had ever made. Our lives intertwined seamlessly, and the once familiar anxieties I had about relationships were replaced by a comforting sense of stability. Laura wasn't just my partner. She was my best friend. Over the months, our relationship deepened in ways I hadn't thought possible. We supported each other through everything. Her late nights at work, my demanding projects, and even the quiet moments when nothing was happening but sitting together, enjoying the silence. But as my life settled into a new rhythm, Emma reappeared once again. Not directly, but through whispers from mutual friends. Apparently, she had started attending therapy and was working on rebuilding her life. She had even begun sharing her story online, warning others not to make the same mistakes she had. One evening, while scrolling through social media, I stumbled upon a post Emma had written. In it, she reflected on the choices that led to the collapse of her marriage. She spoke about the allure of freedom and how she mistook selfishness for independence. "I thought I was freeing myself," she wrote, "but I was really running away from the love and stability I had. By the time I realized it, I'd lost everything that truly mattered." It was strange reading those words. Part of me felt vindicated. She finally understood what she'd done. But another part of me felt pity. I had already healed and moved on, but it seemed Emma was still carrying the weight of her choices. I considered reaching out to her, not to rekindle anything, but to tell her I forgave her. Then I stopped myself. Emma didn't need my forgiveness. She needed to forgive herself. And I needed to keep moving forward, unencumbered by the past. Laura noticed me staring at my phone and asked what was on my mind. I showed her the post. She read it quietly, her face thoughtful. "Do you think she's trying to make amends?" Laura asked. "Maybe," I said. "But honestly, it doesn't matter anymore. I've already made peace with it." Laura smiled and kissed my cheek. "That's why I love you. You're not stuck in the past." As time went on, life continued to improve. Laura and I traveled together, celebrated milestones, and built a home filled with love and laughter. Every day, I found new reasons to be grateful for her and for the life we were creating together. One night, as we sat on the couch with a glass of wine, she turned to me with a playful smile. "I have a question for you," she said. "Another one?" I teased, raising an eyebrow. "This one's big," she said, pulling out a small box from her pocket. My heart skipped a beat as she opened it to reveal a simple, elegant ring. "Will you marry me?" she asked, her voice steady but her eyes sparkling with nervous excitement. I stared at her, stunned, before breaking into a wide grin. "Of course I will," I said, pulling her into a tight hug. In that moment, the last remnants of my past with Emma melted away. What I thought had been the end of my story turned out to be the beginning of something so much better. A year after Laura and I got engaged, we exchanged vows in a small ceremony, surrounded by friends and family. As I stood there, looking into her eyes, I realized how far I had come, not just from the heartbreak of my divorce, but from the self-doubt and pain that had once consumed me. Emma's betrayal had taught me what I didn't want in a partner, but Laura showed me what love truly looked like. Mutual respect, unwavering support, and an unshakable sense of partnership. Looking back, I felt nothing but gratitude for the pain that had shaped me, the lessons that had strengthened me, and the love that had finally found me. My past no longer defined me. My future did. And with Laura by my side, it was brighter than I ever could have imagined. As the years passed, Laura and I built the kind of life I had once only dreamed of. We bought a cozy house with a big backyard where we planted a garden together. On weekends, we hosted game nights with friends, or sometimes we just spent quiet evenings on the porch, watching the sunset with a glass of wine. Our life wasn't perfect. No one's ever is. But the challenges we faced only brought us closer. When Laura's father fell ill, I saw a side of her I hadn't fully appreciated before. Her strength and compassion during those hard times inspired me. She faced everything with grace, and it made me love her even more. Eventually, we started talking about having children. It was a conversation that came naturally, like everything else with Laura. Neither of us had been in a rush, but as our lives settled into a steady rhythm, the idea of expanding our family felt right. A year later, we welcomed our daughter, Grace, into the world. Holding her for the first time was overwhelming, a flood of emotions I could hardly process. I looked at Laura, who was exhausted but glowing with joy, and realized this was the happiest I had ever been. Parenthood brought its own set of challenges, but Laura and I tackled them as a team. Midnight feedings, endless diaper changes, and baby-proofing the house were exhausting but oddly fulfilling. Watching Grace grow was like seeing the world through new eyes. Her laughter became the soundtrack of our lives, and her curiosity reminded us to find wonder in the simplest things. One evening, after Grace had finally gone to sleep, Laura and I sat on the couch, scrolling through old photos on her phone. We laughed at the awkward selfies we'd taken during our first road trip and marveled at how far we'd come. "I'm glad we found each other," Laura said, resting her head on my shoulder. "Me too," I replied, kissing the top of her head. I didn't think I'd ever have this again, this kind of love, this kind of life, Do you ever think about her? Laura asked cautiously. It had been years since Emma had crossed my mind. Occasionally, a mutual friend would mention her in passing, but for the most part, she was a distant memory. Not really, I admitted. I think she was a part of my life to teach me something. But that chapter is so far behind me now. It feels like it happened to someone else. Laura smiled, satisfied with my answer. I'm glad, she said. The truth was, I didn't harbor any resentment toward Emma anymore. If anything, I hoped she had found her own version of happiness. Her choices had pushed me to reevaluate what I wanted out of life and, ultimately, led me to Laura. Years later, when Grace was old enough to understand, I told her about the struggles I had faced before meeting her mom. I wanted her to know that life wasn't always easy, but the hard times didn't last forever. You just have to keep moving forward, I told her. And when you find the right people, hold on to them. They make everything worth it. By then, Laura and I had built the life we'd always dreamed of, full of love, laughter, and resilience. Our family wasn't perfect, but it was ours. As I tucked Grace into bed that night and kissed her forehead, I felt a deep sense of contentment. My journey hadn't been easy, but it had led me to a life richer and more fulfilling than I could have ever imagined. Looking back, I realized the pain of my past wasn't a roadblock. It was a stepping stone. And as I held Laura's hand and watched our daughter drift off to sleep, I knew I had finally found my home.